Did you know that you can actually, somebody can go into the voting, into the polling place on election day, and 2 judges can come out and bring you the ballot at your car. So there's drive-up service. They don't bring you hot dogs or hamburgers, but they will bring you a ballot. So there is officially drive-up service if you need it, and that's something that we hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I just couldn't get out of my car." Well, you totally, that's another thing that you can do. So if people are not convicted of a felony and serving a felony, they are allowed to vote. We were just talking about, however, the mechanics of that, of trying to get election judges to go to the jails, because people are there waiting to go to trial. They are not, our county jails have not been convicted yet. So that's another area where we're working hard as advocacy groups to help people be able to vote. In the state of Minnesota, we do have we have some of the best laws. We have the #1 voter turnout in the country. So that's pretty amazing, which means that people really trust our voting system. But we do have some big inequities. Just like Nakima said, some of our most egregious disparities are especially with people of color in prison. That is, we have some of the highest levels of disparity of especially black men incarcerated versus the population. We also have a very punitive system around people who have served their time. As if somebody has had a felony and they're done serving their time, they're what we call off paper. They no longer have served their parole. Those people can, you can then vote. But a lot of times what happens is there's these people who are stuck in the middle, right? Where you're not quite off paper, as we say. Your sentence isn't quite down. You're out of prison, but you're still on parole. It's about almost 50,000 people, and that are not allowed to vote in the state of Minnesota. And voting is a state-by-state thing too. I mean, the laws are really, there's really not federally we have had, they keep chipping away, but have had some protections. But voting is very much a state-by-state system in terms of the laws and rules. And so in Minnesota, that's one area where a lot of advocacy groups like Common Cause, League of Women Voters, ACLU, a lot of other advocacy groups are working on something called Restore the Vote, so that when people leave prison, they would automatically be eligible to vote. So there's lots of ways, like you heard even from, the 60s when we heard about, having literacy tests. There's still a lot of barriers that can get in the way. But what I really encourage people to do is to know your rights ahead of time. We have some papers you can take, but on the Secretary of State's website, know that, because you don't want to go into the polling place and be intimidated by, somebody saying, well, you can't do that, you can't do this. Especially same-day voting. Same-day voting it's amazing that we can do that in the state of Minnesota. But you need to, it's good to know the rules about how it all works. So, all right. So the question really is what do you do if you feel intimidated? So there's kind of 2 parts to that question. One is, I would say, is what do you do if you see somebody being intimidated or you feel intimidated? But I'm going to back up and start a little bit about, what is intimidation, or what could that look like for you? And a lot of times, one of the things that we could find this year, for example, we have a law that we cannot have, there can be no campaign materials within 100 feet of a polling place. So, so we have, you have Tim Walz and Jeff Johnson, running for governor, for example. There cannot be somebody with a Tim Walz button or a sticker or a t-shirt or anything in the polling place or within 100 feet of the polling place. However, if you wanted to wear a sign, a sign, a t-shirt that said the NRA or Black Lives Matter or I love puppies. You can wear those into the polling place. And this is relevant because we've normally had a more strict standard that people really not even have those statements, any political statement. But there was an actual Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled this past summer on a ruling in the state of Minnesota that our legislature has not quite defined yet what is political well enough, such that they are really saying, well, you haven't well defined it, therefore you could see more t-shirts or buttons or stickers that you might go, I don't know, it seems like, should that really be, they look like a political message. So that can be on all the spectrum, like vote climate. We're not voting climate on the ballot. That would probably be accepted. There might be some confusion though, and I think that's a good thing this year because this is new, because the law changed. So I feel for election judges because they're going to be like, what they normally would say is cover it up. So here's my League of Women Voters. They might say, just cover that up, and just cover it up. Because the idea is you want to not have any, you don't want people to feel intimidated, to your point, or feel like, oh, I don't know. But if you see something or something makes you feel uncomfortable, the election judges are there for that reason. There is what's called there's the Minnesota Voters Bill of Rights, which I have up here and I'll hand out to you guys. It tells you also where to go if you have a complaint. So now what's interesting at the League of Women Voters on election day, I would say the number one call we tend to get, we do get a lot of calls of people who will say, I was told I couldn't vote because. There are very few reasons you can't vote. There really, but the one thing would be if you are not registered to vote, our laws are still very generous. If you're not registered to vote and you don't have any ID, as long as someone, if Anastasia went with me and I had a utility bill and she's like, hey, she is who she says she is, and I can show you that I live here, I can register and vote on that day. But those questions, sometimes people come up. They say, well, why can she vouch for you? Is she able to vote? So you can't have someone vouch for you for whom someone vouched for them. There are a few little, those kind of wrinkles. But the Voters Bill of Rights is kind of interesting because it tells you basically how it works, where to file a complaint if there's a complaint. Generally speaking, things really go well. But to your question, if they don't, there are places to call. And I think if you see someone, the biggest thing I see is people who are told to be quiet. I see a lot of election judges, people are trying to talk about who should I vote for. Let's say, Kinley and I went and I'm like, oh, we're talking, and they'll say, oh, don't talk, you can't talk to anyone. I hear that a lot at the polling place. We get a lot. That's probably our number one thing. It's okay to talk to people. Again, bring that sample ballot in and be able to use those resources.